If you enjoy reading modern fantasy at all, then you really can't go anywhere without hearing the name Brandon Sanderson. I mean, he is one of those major players in the publishing scene right now when it comes to fantasy. Somebody convince me he's not just 3 typewriters in a trench coat, because I don't understand how he writes so much with such a consistent quality. And I'm not saying he is the most quality writer out there in the fantasy genre by any means, but you can expect a consistent quality to his writing, and that makes him one of my favorite authors of all time. Now, Brando Sando is known for his unique, intricate magic systems, his extensive plotting, and his world building that typically stands out from a lot of the competition. Not to mention that most of his fantasy works are all connected into his fictional universe called the Cosmere, which means there's lots of secrets and Easter eggs to uncover and big reveals with each new book. So it can be incredibly satisfying for all those fans that are caught up in the Cosmere. Now, he's also developed a lot of characters that you want to root for and that go through really interesting character arcs. But whether you think Sanderson is overhyped or not, it's clear that he's doing something right. And having read all of his published works up to this point, and having watched all of his university creative writing lessons, I feel like he's an author that has a wealth of learning opportunities for aspiring writers. Welcome to episode 1 of a brand new series on the channel called What Writers Can Learn. I'll be making similar videos for various different authors, so let me know in the comments which author you want to see me make a similar video on next. Now, as I'm writing my own fantasy series, I really try to pay attention and study each new book and author that I read, so really I wanted to make this video because I feel like it's helpful for me to look back on, but obviously I hope it will be helpful for you as well. This is a breakdown of some of those key lessons that writers can take away from reading Brandon Sanderson's works, as well as some of his writing advice that he's given online. This video is sponsored by Skillshare. Summertime is quickly approaching, and whether you have a break from school or work is slowing down, the summer is the perfect time to explore your passions and your hobbies. And I plan on spending a lot of the summer honing my writing. So I've been taking a class called The Writer's Toolkit: 6 Steps to a Successful Writing Habit by author and editor Simon Van Boy. Honestly, I felt so inspired after taking this class. Simon makes you feel like developing a successful writing habit is actually possible. It's not that far out of reach. And he also reassures you that it's normal to feel overwhelmed. This is some of the best advice and motivation that I've ever seen on actually starting writing. I feel like it's a really great lesson for beginner writers, but also even if you're a veteran writer, there is some really good advice in here. So I would highly recommend the class, and you can find it over on Skillshare, which is the largest online learning community for creatives, with thousands of classes led by industry pros across film, illustration, design, freelance, productivity, and so much more. I know I'm really excited to learn new skills this summer using Skillshare, and you can also invest in yourself and get started on your learning journey this summer using Skillshare. The first 500 of you to use my link in the description will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare, and you can get started today. Thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring the video. Now back to the video. It goes without saying that one of Sanderson's greatest strengths is his exceptional ability to create an intricate and immersive fictional world, each with its own unique system of magic, politics, and cultures. From the storm-swept lands of Roshar in the Stormlight Archive to the ash-covered Scadrial in Mistborn, really his settings are almost characters in their own right. They're all very unique and memorable, and one of the major takeaways for writers is the importance of creating a set of coherent rules that govern your world. And this is something that Sanderson has also applied to his magic systems. In fact, you probably know one of the things he's most known for is his hard, well-defined magic systems. And Sanderson has created a set of laws for his magic, which dictate how magic can be used and its cost. He teaches that the more thought out the world's rules, the more immersive and believable it becomes. Sanderson's first law of magic is that an author's ability to solve conflict with magic is directly proportional to how well the reader understands said magic. He goes on to explain that even when you're writing a soft magic system, where the magic is more mysterious in order to develop that sense of wonder that you shouldn't let the magic solve the problems for the characters. Use magic for visual and ambiance, but don't use it to solve all the problems of the characters and to solve all the important plot points. Unless it's there to screw things up for the characters, that's always okay. J.R.R. Tolkien may have used a soft magic system, but he refrained from letting Gandalf solve every problem with the wave of his staff. And if you're writing a hard magic system, when your character runs into a problem, you should ask yourself, how could the character use what they already have and know to solve this conflict? Then make sure they use what they have, instead of giving them something new. This will make the story more interesting and force your characters to stretch the limits of their abilities. Sanderson's second law of magic is basically the idea that the limitations of the magic system are much more interesting than the strengths. He goes on to give the example that Superman is more interesting because he can't see through lead and because kryptonite is his weakness. Remember, limitations add conflict, and conflict is what drives the plot. And then Sanderson's third law is to expand on what you already have before adding something new. And he explains this is to avoid the dangers of over world building or world builder's disease. It's much better to focus in and add more depth to what you already have. In epic fantasy, it's not the number of magic systems or powers that creates immersive and memorable world building. It's not even the magic and powers themselves. It's how well they're ingrained into the society, culture, ecology, economics, and everyday lives of the people in the stories. In developing your magic, your job as a writer is to look at how the changes you've made will affect the world as a whole. Now, Sanderson also suggests that you tie your powers, cultures, and themes together in your story. In designing the magic system for Mistborn, instead of having a wide variety of powers that don't really fit with each other, Sanderson realized that if he themed all of the abilities towards things that a group of thieves would want to be able to do, he could name each power after a role in a thieving crew. And really, this cohesion is the core that brings this magic system together. So tying your powers together thematically with your novel and asking yourself how they play into the themes, you're gonna end up with a magic system that feels like an important part of your story. And this belief is expressed through deep planning and connection. Stormlight is a glowing energy source that's brought by the high storms on Roshar. And gemstones, whether bare or encased in glass spheres, when left outside during a high storm, will become infused with stormlight, which will remain within the stones for a week or so. And these gems are used as the currency on Roshar. But the stormlight within can also be used for various other things. It can fuel the operation of fabrials, this sort of ancient technology, and people even use gemstones just as a lighting source. Not to mention it can fuel surge binding abilities, which is one of the magic systems in the Stormlight archive. Sanderson's worlds are usually structured around several cornerstones. It's as though he takes the major staple of the world and works outward to see what a world ravaged by a sweeping eastern storm would look like. How would this major aspect of the world affect the flora and fauna? Which creatures would thrive and which would need to relocate? How would people and society adapt to these conditions? All of these questions arise when there is a major world-building contributor at play, and Sanderson's planning and skillfully placed scenes answer those questions in a satisfying yet intriguing way just when we need the answers, and it always feels like there's more to ask and learn. But because we're shown how everything works in relation to each other, we trust that our curiosity will not return void. And it's this essence of harmony of the world-building elements in relation to each other that creates that immersive feeling from Sanderson's worlds. Now, Sanderson always builds a strong structure for his plots. He extensively outlines his books, making sure that each character arc, plot twist, and revelation serves the overarching narrative, and his approach to wrapping everything up by the end is sometimes called the Sanderlanche or the Sanderson Avalanche by fans. I mean, if you've read a Sanderson novel, you know what I'm talking about. This is where multiple storylines and conflicts all collide and explode at the end, and this shows the the value of careful plotting. So writers can learn from his example by understanding the importance of structuring a story in a way that builds the tension and then delivers satisfying resolutions by converging multiple plot lines at once. Now, one of the ways you can exercise this in your own writing is by progressing, setting up, and firing multiple Chekov's guns in quick succession or all at once. And for anyone unaware, Chekov's gun is a storytelling idea created by the playwright Anton Chekov, which states that if a gun is hung on the wall in the first act, it must fire by the third. Of course, the gun being a placeholder for anything the author signals to the reader. Now, Sanderson himself has talked about this during his lecture series for BYU, which you can actually watch here on YouTube. I'll have some links in the description. But often, Sanderson will set up multiple Chekov's guns at once, then fire them off or progress them at different speeds. When one gun fires or progresses, Sanderson will then make a new Chekov's gun, which allows for another metric to track for the reader, keeping everyone engaged and interested in the story. Now, this leads me to talk about Sanderson's method of plotting. He refers to this as the 3 Ps, which are promise, progress, and payoff. Promise is the first that he focuses on, and this can manifest in several different ways. Sometimes these are done with character promises or world building promises, but most important for plotting, the first promise is the tone promise. This allows Sanderson to get the reader ready to understand the overall essence of the story and the tone. A swashbuckling sea adventure would start out during a battle at sea, or maybe in the middle of a storm. Mysteries begin with a slew of the unknown being thrown at the reader, along with a touch of information in order to let us know the detective is solving things. It sets the proper expectations to the reader and lets the author move more intentionally about their story, knowing that the author's plans and reader's expectations are both aligned. Next, we have progress, and this is the one which Sanderson deems the most important of the 3. Instead of simply showing the gun and then firing it later, Sanderson exercises an active progression of information or action surrounding his Chekov's gun. This could be by showing the magic early on and throughout the story, diving into the technicalities of how it works. It could be in the progression of a character's skill. If a new hero is destined to fight later down the line, then showing the gradual improvement of their abilities makes the sense of payoff feel much more grand, because we get to experience the journey. And it's all about the journey before destination. Progress can be shown in dozens of different ways, from maps to page numbers to skills to magic. All of these create what Sanderson calls senses of progress, as he believes that all progress stories are illusionary, making sure you're continuing to justify the promise and showing progress in some way is going to help readers hold on in anticipation. And then payoff is the final part of Sanderson's method of plotting, and this is what readers remember after the story ends. This part of the story justifies everything that's happened up until this point. The narrative promise at the beginning and the progression of the skills we've seen the characters gain all hinge on the climax, and Sanderson usually believes that the best form of handling this is the giving twice method, in which you give the reader what they were expecting from the plot and you give them something more. The illustration Sanderson uses in his lesson is giving a child a toy car. If the child loves cars and asks for one for Christmas, then you plan to get them a car. But then, through the months leading up to Christmas, you teach them all about planes, and the child learns to love it. Then when Christmas comes around, instead of giving them just the car, you give them both a car and a plane. So not only does this method elevate your story, but it actually classifies as a twist as well. By balancing these 3 throughout his stories, Sanderson's able to properly accumulate the anticipation of his infamous Sanderlanche. And learning to understand and emulate these can help you in crafting your own story's brilliant climax. One of the most common complaints about Sanderson's work that I've seen online is that his writing is too simple. And I don't really understand this. Yes, it's clear and easy to understand, But how exactly is that a bad thing? In fact, I think this could be a strength actually, depending on your own writing style and what you're writing. Some people just love and value more highly poetic prose, and that's okay. I'm someone who loves more beautiful, flowery writing at times. However, it can easily break the flow of the story, especially in fantasy when you have so many world building elements to juggle. Readers don't really need to be bogged down with purple prose as well. And Sanderson's often introducing complex systems and a lot of details and lore to take in, so really I think his writing style is perfect for what he's writing. Imagine how long a Stormlight Archive book would be if he tried writing more poetically. At that point, they'd probably double as a weapon. And Sanderson has said that he's created this style on purpose. He says, "I've slaved over my writing style, practicing for decades, honing it for crisp clarity. My prose is usually intended to convey ideas, theme, and character, then go out of the way." I mean, as a writer, the thing I find most impressive about his writing style is that his prose is just as powerful despite being considered simple. I mean, the Hero of Ages gave me chills, especially with the whole Sanderlanche of an ending. The Stormlight Archive, so many moments in that series made me put down the book and just smile and think about how epic the scene was that I just read. There's multiple scenes in the Stormlight Archive where you just want to raise a fist and cheer because of how heroic some moment was. Sometimes you need to put down the book and just process how amazing a scene was. Shout out to the one scene in Words of Radiance. We all know the one. And this reminds me that how your writing impacts the reader is far more important than the vastness of your vocabulary. And honestly, this kind of brings me hope for my own writing, because I know that my writing is never going to be as beautiful as some of the other great authors that I admire. But I can try my best to make it impactful. Now we need to talk about POVs. In series like the Stormlight Archive, Sanderson employs multiple viewpoint characters, and this helps build up a rich and multifaceted narrative. It allows readers to see the world from diverse perspectives and enriches the storytelling and deepens the world building. And for writers, taking a look at the Stormlight Archive is basically a masterclass in managing multiple narratives without losing focus on the main plot. Stormlight has a lot of viewpoints, and even the interludes hold some really important details and offer some interesting viewpoints on the world. Now, this can be somewhat polarizing in the fantasy community, and even more so within individual fandoms, because multiple point of views can cause the characters to inherently draw away from each other. And sometimes there's characters that people may generally like less or even dislike reading about compared to the others. And when there's long stretches with pages and pages from their viewpoint, it can cause readers to get bored really quick. Now, while Sanderson isn't immune to criticism around this, it's unquestionable that his handling of several point of views is brilliantly done. And this can intertwine with the previous point, as promises and payoffs are more complexly timed and create a sense of dynamic motion of the story. Another advantage of multiple point of views that Sanderson uses is the ability to feed the reader different types of information regarding the world building. For example, seamlessly following Kaladin through Book 1 of Stormlight, The Way of Kings, would heavily limit perspectives of the political or academic climate of Roshar. Instead, Sanderson uses Dalinar and Shallan, respectively, to broaden the scope of his world. And this in turn allows for world elements that have been explained in one viewpoint to appear seamlessly in another, without the need for explanation or justification. And really, this allows each viewpoint to have its own standalone value to the reader, enhancing the cohesiveness of the overall narrative. The skill of incorporating value in the various viewpoints through information and incorporating dynamic plotting through characters lets Sanderson tell longer stories. Books as long as the entries in the Stormlight Archive can threaten to grow incredibly boring, but but Sanderson's use of feeding us plot lines and information really helped to keep things moving, and this is something that all of us can learn from. With all that in mind, Sanderson recommends starting off very slowly when you have multiple point of views. On his website, he has a page called General Advice for New Writers, and it's here that he mentions that you shouldn't try to write too many viewpoints at first. Even Robert Jordan started small when it came to his viewpoints. Book 1 mostly focused on Rand and only adds Perrin and Nynaeve as viewpoints later after the group splits up. Now, Brando Sando has created some really complex characters that go through a lot of growth. Characters like Dalinar Kholin from the Stormlight Archive undergo significant personal transformations that are both challenging and rewarding. Sanderson shows that characters should evolve in response to the events of the story, shaped by their experiences and the choices they make. And we'll take a deeper look at some of his characters soon, but there are generally two people a reader looks at when assessing a character: the person the character is now and the person that they could be. Characters that display good evolution generally have well-paced and creative ways to flourish toward the end character. Those are what we commonly refer to as character arcs, and they don't always need to be expected or positive, but generally good characters with solid motivations and their own voice can be placed in a circumstance and the reader can generally guess what is going to happen, or at least how that character will react. Now, excellent writers like Sanderson are able to slowly change what the character could be through events and choices, with each decision or event changing that trajectory just a little bit. How that happens depends on a variety of things, but a writer should know when sitting down what their character could be at the very least. Then they use those motivations, changing or consistent, in order to steer them into what they could be. Now, this is commonly explored through character flaws, where someone needs to change a behavior in order to break through a mental or physical barrier of some kind. Now, as writers, we can take away the importance of character development that is not only believable, but also deeply integral to the story's progression. Now, Sanderson has mentioned how he thinks of all characters on 3 sliders, one for competence, one for likability, and one for productivity. The left side of the slider is set for low amounts of the character trait, while the right side is for high amounts of it. By moving characters on these sliders, they're able to become more complex and nuanced over the course of events.
But the idea is that your likability is how much empathy you establish for the character in your story. Your proactivity relates to their motivation and what they're doing to achieve that motivation, and their competence has to do with where they are on that kind of progress scale of getting better at whatever they want to do.
And he believes these 3 things correlate direction to the 3 things that make a character interesting, which is to establish likability, establish rooting interests, and progress. Establishing likability can be done in a ton of different ways. Relatability, for example, can be a strong gateway into liking a character. Another thing that generally disarms the reader is kindness, where a reader feels they can trust a character simply because of how they interact with the world around them. Even further, the way that others in the story perceive them can help support whether or not we like that character. Characters well liked by others are often well liked by readers as well. Establishing rooting interest lies in actually establishing motivation within the story. Why exactly do the characters do what they do, and why do they want what they want? Asking and presenting these questions will give readers something to look forward to. Now, another good question that Sanderson poses when establishing rooting interests is, why can't the character have what they want? It gives the character an inherent pushback and wall that they need to break through and overcome, which allows the story to shape itself a little more concretely. Now, these characters also need a personal connection to the plot or the motivation. I mean, after all, an artist that's not interested in sports has no interest in whether or not that sports team wins the championship. Making sure the end goal of the story has at least some personal connection to the character is going to help that rooting interest stick and feel grounded. And then the final thing is progress, which is pretty similar to how we described it earlier in the video. This can be done in several different ways, but the one that Sanderson focuses on are either character flaws that are signposted as something the character needs to overcome, or a journey of some sort with an end goal in mind. These can be driven by a sense of mystery or suspense, as all of the story hinges on the characters taking the steps they need toward that progress for things to resolve. So those are Sanderson's primary tools of creating complex and dynamic characters, but now let's take a brief look at some specific examples of his characters and discuss what techniques he's using to make them more memorable and multidimensional. Starting off with Vin, the protagonist of the original Mistborn trilogy. She starts her journey as a distrustful street urchin that's deeply scarred by her past, and Sanderson uses Vin's initial wariness to create a relatable character who gradually learns to trust and love others. However, this evolution does not come easily. I mean, right when she begins to trust again and experience love, her paranoia shows itself again in full force. Her paranoia shifts from a means of protecting herself to a means of protecting the one she loves. And I feel like Vin's trust issues resulting in overprotectiveness once she does finally trust someone is a very realistic quality of her character. Her relationship with Kelsier and Elend allows readers to see her vulnerabilities and strengths, making her growth believable and compelling. So writers can learn from Vin's character arc the importance of vulnerability in character development, showing how personal change can drive the larger narrative forward. Moving on to Stressed, Depressed, and Storm-Blessed, Kaladin from the Stormlight Archive. Now, Kaladin's story is an exploration of leadership, responsibility, and mental health. Initially, he's introduced as a surgeon's apprentice turned soldier, and Kaladin struggles with depression and survivor's guilt, and not to mention PTSD. Now, Sanderson uses these elements not as mere traits, but as central themes that affect every decision that Kaladin makes. And this authentic portrayal of mental health acts as a great way to challenge this character whose journey brings them from a slave to a windrunner, whose power to protect others is as much as a curse as it is a gift. From Kaladin, writers can learn to weave complex personal struggles into their character's role in their world, enhancing the realism and the depth of the narrative. And you can also learn that while honor is dead, it can live on in your heroes. In Kaladin, Sanderson creates some truly heroic moments that make you want to jump up and cheer, and it's all handled so well because we know the struggles that Kaladin faces, and there's a lot of satisfaction when we see him succeed. And then we have Shallan Davar. Now, her journey is one of self-discovery and grappling with a hard time coping. Her use of light weaving to create illusions mirrors her internal battle with her traumatic past and the personas that she adopts to cope with it. Each layer of Shallan's personality is revealed through her interactions and conflicts, providing a really rich and layered character study. And writers can draw from Shallan's complexities the importance of aligning a character's inner conflicts with external abilities or roles, which really allows for a more nuanced exploration of identity and personal growth. And finally, we have Dalinar Kholin. His transformation from a ruthless warlord to a visionary leader trying to unite a fractured world really encapsulates a powerful theme of redemption. And Sanderson uses Dalinar's vivid flashbacks and the evolving revelations about his past to challenge the reader's perception of him. This gradual unveiling of Dalinar's motivations and his regrets provides a profound commentary on forgiveness and change. So for writers, Dalinar's evolution is a masterclass in developing a redemption arc that's intertwined with the story's broader themes, such as leadership and morality. Now, something that Sanderson does that I love and I think writers can learn from is that many of his characters start off with an air of mystery. For instance, Kelsier's motto is "There's always another secret," and he's a character with a tragic backstory that's always hinted at, which just made me want to read on and learn more about him. We know that Kaladin lost his brother, but we don't know how until later. Shallan is clearly suppressing memories about something that happened to her mother, but we don't know what. And Dalinar can't remember his own wife's name, but we don't know why. If you want your readers to be hooked, then slowly tease some breadcrumbs of information about your characters that will add depth and intrigue. Now, both Kaladin and Dalinar's backstory was a big inspiration for me thinking about the histories of my protagonists and expanding upon some of the off-page experiences that made them who they are when the story begins. Now, something else I really like about Sanderson's writing is how thought-provoking it is, and how his characters ask a lot of philosophical questions. And Sanderson is careful to always give a very balanced viewpoint without pushing his own views. And this is something I feel like writers can learn from as well. For instance, in Mistborn, Sazed is a scholar specialized in learning about all the various religions in the world, which the Lord Ruler made extinct 1,000 years prior. If you've read the series, you know that the character goes through a spiritual journey as the series progresses. Now, many authors might take this storyline and use it in a very heavy-handed way to push their own beliefs, either condemning all religions as corrupt or uplifting their own personal views. But Sanderson is generally pretty good at just giving us some philosophical questions to think about and then allowing the reader to find their own conclusion. Another thing I learned from reading Sanderson is that not every modern fantasy work needs to be explicit. Now, really, in recent years, the main thing that separates adult fantasy from young adult fantasy is the amount of sex, offensive language, and violence that it contains. Now, I'm someone who enjoys a lot of grimdark series. I'm not necessarily sensitive to that, but I do read a wide range of genres, and I know not every book needs those qualities to be considered adult, and I really don't think they should be required to have those qualities. In comparison to many other adult fantasy series out there, Sanderson's almost PG in comparison, and a lot of people list this as like a negative of Sanderson's writing, and I don't think it needs to be. I mean, his books still contain war, violence, romance, and morally gray characters, but it's done in a way that puts the focus on the meaning of the events rather than the events themselves. He never delves into super explicit visualization, and I actually find it really refreshing to see. It opens up his books to a wider audience that can enjoy it, and also it kind of feels like a return to heroic, epic fantasy. And while others might find that kind of tame, I feel like it has its place. So the takeaway is that you should never feel pressure to make your stories more darker or spicier if that's not what you're comfortable writing. Being explicit should not be what makes adult fantasy adult. And of course, beyond his storytelling, Sanderson's disciplined approach to writing is something that any writer can admire. He's known for his ability to produce a steady stream of high-quality books, and this is a testament to his organized, methodical approach to writing. I mean, the man shares his writing progress publicly. He gives himself deadlines and goals. Being consistent is 50% of the work. Regardless of your skill and your ideas, the actual writing must be done. Sanderson has a lot of videos touching on this topic, but one of the general rules that he implements into his practice, of course, is dedicating time, and that's something that a lot of people struggle with. While Sanderson's writing is his full-time job, that isn't really the case for most of us, and Sanderson has recommended that you find and dedicate hours to writing ahead of time rather than just writing when the inspiration strikes. Developing a consistent work ethic will help you with progressing as a storyteller and just give you more opportunities to learn. This is something I struggle with a lot as a writer. I'm a very busy person. Like, I'm always working on videos and scripts for my videos, so I'm usually just writing when the inspiration strikes, but I really want to work on this myself. I want to work on dedicating hours of time to actually focus on writing, even if I'm not feeling that inspired. And one of the tips that Sanderson often uses is called priming the mind. And basically this is just when you physically don't have the time to sit down and write, but you're thinking about what you're going to work on next when you are able to sit down and write. So whether you're walking, going to the gym, doing dishes or laundry or some other chore, this is time when your mind is able to think, and you can use that time by thinking about what you're going to write. right. Brandon Sanderson's contribution to fantasy is immense, not just in terms of his own works, but also what he has to offer as a teacher to others. Although I'm a long ways off from publishing my own first novel, Sanderson is just someone that I find so inspiring, and I feel like there's a lot to learn from his work. Writers who study his approach to world building, character development, prose, and structured plotting can learn how to enhance their own stories. His discipline and writing practice is a reminder that beyond talent, the regularity and dedication one brings to the desk are just as critical to success. Anyways, I hope this video was helpful to you. There's a lot here that I feel like I want to keep in mind as I continue writing, and yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you want to support the channel further, then make sure to check out my Patreon or become a channel member. Huge thank you to all my patrons and my channel members, and I'll see you soon.